Hello there, friends. Before we jump into it, if you like what we do here on cPDH.guide, the YouTube, and you want to support us in a free way, because, you know, that's what friends do, hit that like, hit that subscribe, even share the damn thing. All right, on to the show. This is crazy. This is crazy. What's up, party people? How you doing? Bobby B. Fine in the house.
What's up?
I know. I always come at these in this weird like left field thing. So we got a question today from a new member, new joiner in the .guide server, asking about potentially a video that describes like a person's first tournament experience, like what to expect and all that stuff. And you know, I was like, hey, Self, why don't we reach out to a tournament organizer? Jesus, did I say that right? Mm. Tournament organizer. Close enough. And ask them, you know, kind of what their experience is. I mean, Bobby, you've only put on, you know, 1 million events and participated in 1 million events.
Maybe participated in 1 million, not put on 1 million, but put on a good chunk at this point. I run a tournament or two every now and then, so.
So surely you would know. I mean, my experience notwithstanding, I forget normally when I'm behind this microphone. I'm so focused on the person on the other side there that this time I actually get to talk. So, so I mean, Bobby, you've got how many wins? 1 win?
1 PDH tournament win, yeah.
1 PDH tournament win. Do you have any top 4s?
Yeah, a couple others. I have 2 other top 4s.
Okay, so I am in the same boat. I have 1 win and 2 top 4s. Now, I know that there's going to be some people out there that'll be like, well, top 4's not winning. We get it, but also if you've ever participated in an event, top 4s can be interesting places where people sometimes just get the nuts and just win. And other times it could be this slog fest and politics takes a play, and you know, so we typically regard these top 4 appearances as not a win, but something definitely worthy of note. And then on top of that, you have put on, I think you just had your 8th sanctuary, 7th sanctuary.
7th, I think.
The Roman numerals get me every single time. It's like, is this 42 or, you know, VX? What are we doing here?
7 or 700, something like that. Yeah.
Right on. So along with your tournament performance on your own and your tournament hosting, organizing, as it were, working with peripheral folks such as commentators, herding the cats that are tournament players, and all of those associated things, it's safe to say that you kind of know your thing. So leveraging, this is an appeal to authority is what this is. So that said, I quickly drummed up some talking points, shared those with Bobby, and we're basically going to go down the list and ruminate with our profound experience, talking specifically to these points. Are you ready, my friend?
I was born ready.
Sweet, let's get it. Okay, so point number 1, understanding the format. Now, I know on its face, it's like, well, it's Pauper Commander. You know, what's to understand, particularly about this format? Now, just because it's commons and uncommon, it doesn't make it any less complicated. There's certain rules that you have to kind of abide by. We do have a banned list. So it's quite extensive. It's 2 cards. It's Rhystic Study and Mystic Remor. We did have an event this year where a person, unbeknownst of the rules, showed up with, I don't know if they had Remor in there, but they at least had Rhystic in their deck. So not to oversimplify or overstate this particular point, but knowing the rules of the game that you're playing and understanding that there is a ban list, knowing that, we do play with a subset of the competitive rules, which I believe you could probably talk about a little bit more deeply Just knowing those things. In fact, that's a good pivot. Take it away.
Yeah. So in addition to just the format rules, there's all these other fun like tournament etiquette rules and so there's these multiplayer supplements that various commander groups and judges have worked on to implement. So knowing how those work, there's the normal kind of competitive REL rules that apply to 1v1 Magic, and some of that carries over, but multiplayer is a whole nother animal. So knowing what rules apply to the game you're playing and the tournament you're playing in is huge. It lets you know kind of how to expect results. Like what happens if one opponent misses a trigger, two of us want it to happen, one person doesn't, right? Like you can figure out how all that is going to shake out by just understanding the rules. So looking into that, it'll tell you when to call a judge. Always feel comfortable calling a judge if there's ever any uncertainty with any kind of rule, whether it's the format, whether it's etiquette, whether it's just how does this card work, anything.
When in doubt, judge it out, right?
Yeah, that's one thing that I cannot overstate enough. Like calling a judge, like the judge is there to help everyone. The judge is not this scary person. Like never feel afraid to call a judge, even if someone is insisting, no, we don't need a judge, but you still feel like call it anyway. There's no reason not to call them.
So where would these rules per se, like when you're hosting your events now? Of course, I'm putting Bobby in the hot seat here, and his experience is not the ubiquitous experience across all TOs, what have you. But like for tournaments that you host, where can players find the rules on the Sanctuary PDH server, for example?
Yes. So there's a few places because I don't want it to be hard to find. So there's a rules channel under the tournament section in the server. If you go to sanctuarypdh.com, there's an info and rules section, which has the live document of all the rules. Same thing that is linked to in the Discord. And then on the registration page, it links to all the rules and said you have to, when you register, you're clicking a button that says, I have read these rules and I understand them. So once you're registering, it's on you. Like you're saying whether or not you've read them, you're agreeing to abide by them. So you should probably go take a look at them at the very least to know what you're getting yourself into.
And there's definitely one specific point there. So my man Bobby here hosts online tournaments. So those differ from paper tournaments. Paper tournaments, they usually have like a paper deck list turn in, or you can digitally submit through Moxfield if they're using an appropriate TO software that accept those things. And they'll do like deck checks, randomly to make sure that everybody's on the up and up. That doesn't necessarily translate over to digital formats. So relative to that, there's some items like setup requirements, good internet, sound, video. Like, have you seen good examples of that and bad examples of that?
Yeah. I mean, there's everything in between, good and bad. So yeah, like online tournaments are a whole nother animal. They can take, you can have people playing via webcam. You can have people playing via virtual playtest platforms like Moxfield in combination with OBS. You can have people using cockatrice, there's all these different ways. And so one important thing is in most organizers, if they're hosting online tournaments, will have some additional guidelines that they're not just like rules about gameplay, they're rules about setups. And so, you want to make sure your setup is clear for, you and your opponents. People should be able to hear you. Like communication is one of the biggest parts of Magic, especially in multiplayer Magic. So like making sure you're in a place where you have solid internet connection, solid sound that isn't, rustling or babies yelling or
you definitely want your video to be stable, like even down to like avoiding misclicking between windows and having that flicker on the screen abruptly. Sound is a little less critical, not that it's not important, but your video feed that you are sharing, and it's usually via Spell Table, you want to make sure that's crystal clear and perfect every single time, because that could end up in a warning. Warning or something from the judge.
You don't want to end up getting, I mean, we've had people disconnect for seconds, and it's a warning, it's a quick thing. Hey, a spell table fails every now and then. That's the internet, right? But if you end up like blinking out and like going black for like a minute at a time several times over the course of one match, like that's
no good.
You're making the game harder for everyone. It's hard to know whether or not your setup is, and the integrity of what's going on in your board state is staying the same, because we don't see it. And it can lead to game losses or disqualifications, and that's I feel bad for you, it's a feel bad for everyone else. Like, the judge doesn't want to do it, I don't want to have to do it, no one wants to have to experience that. So just making sure you're kind of preparing and knowing what you have, and making sure you're capable of participating in the tournaments.
100. And I know all this seems like like supremely technical. You've got the technical aspects of the rules you have to be concerned with, and then you have actual technology, especially if you're in an online environment, and how you're interacting with your opponents. Usually, one thing I guess we neglected to mention is that your video feed will typically go through like a spell table type apparatus, and then your audio will be transmitted via a Discord channel where you're just kind of all together in a group. So there's some technical considerations regarding those rules and the actual technology that you have to consider. But there's one more like technical piece that a lot of people don't consider, and this is where I get to plug my thing. Thanks for the smile, Bobby. So I'm not the only person on the planet who curates metadata, out of the format. There's a lot of people that I think Bobby actually has sanctuary specific items still on his website. It's true. Okay. On his website that shows all of the sanctuary related events and the data associated with those. I go a little bit more broadly, and I look at the majority. I want to say the majority of known PDH tournaments that abide by a similar scope of rules. If they have like point systems and things of that nature, I usually don't include those because those deviate too far and potentially skew the data. But when you're trying to take a look at the meta, as it were, the infamous meta, I would suggest going to cpdh.guide, and on top of that, Puzzle, my man Dallas, and I do quarterly update videos where we talk about the previous quarter and the performance of decks and what we've seen occur during that. Now, that's not predictive. However, you can say if Gretchen's a good deck. Bobby, is Gretchen a good deck?
Great deck.
So if it's a good deck last quarter, it's probably going to be a good deck next quarter, and so on, so on, and so on, and so on. So it'll give you a feel for what you can expect to be up against. If you see a lot of mid-range happening in a particular like sub-meta of the larger meta, now we're using meta way too much. If you see, like, for example, it wasn't that way the last time, but like Common Cause, another online tournament, has traditionally been more of a mid-rangey, grindy kind of tournament. It's since kind of turned a little bit and became a little bit more combo oriented, which the online meta tends to be more combo driven. But looking at the data from each one of those events and looking at those quarterly reviews would give you somewhat of a sense of kind of the amalgamation of all those trajectories to give you like, hey, this is what I need to expect, and this is how I need to, which pivots into point number 2, deck construction. So once I figured out that I need to know these well, I need to know all the rules, all the comprehensive rules, learn them. No, it's impossible. Once I have a good grasp of the rules, and I know, like, technologically certain decks, this is where deck construction comes in with the tech piece. If you have an Alexios, which I can't remember Alexios' full card name, but that's a commander that you pass around the table, you're going to have to figure out how to engage with your opponents, by passing around your commander in a virtual way. So that's a minor deck construction like nuance, but it's definitely one of those things that you need to think about when you're looking at the meta and figuring out what you're going to play against what the perceived meta is. have anything to add to that?
No, I mean, knowing what you're up against is going to greatly shape what you play. Like it's as simple as that. Very few decks can just do what they want to do and ignore what other people are doing.
Which is a power level. Yeah, see, we're hitting the points right there, man. So PDH is a great format in the fact that you get to express yourself in similar ways to big EDH. It's also similar in nature that there's a certain subset of cards of the greater Commander format that allows you to kind of play in a more uber competitive way. I'm not saying that all cards can't be necessarily competitive, because right in the right context, you could utilize their synergies for something. I'm not saying that's 100%, but I'm not willing to rule anything out. That's the joy of my experience in the last couple of years. So that said, generally speaking, though, you want to make sure that you're bringing a deck of an appropriate power level. And let's provide an example. Humble Defector. It's a red creature that when it taps, you draw 2 cards and you pass it to an opponent. It may be kitschy because red card draw, right? But now you're passing that card draw to your opponent, which is generally not an acceptable strategy in a competitive environment, because you're giving your opponent resources. So, I'm not saying that somehow, somewhere in 10 years, there won't be enough card volume to make sure that Humble Defector has, eliminated that negative downside of that fact. However, it's unlikely, that's what I'm getting at, it's unlikely that you'll be able to navigate around giving your opponents cards while you're trying to do something in a monocolored deck. That's what I'm saying.
Don't tell the pals you're talking mess about Humble Defector. So.
No, it's a great casual PDH card. No. It's a juicer of a PDH regular PDH commander. Absolutely fun in social environments. However, tournaments aren't. That's the dichotomy I'm trying to establish here, is that things that are fun socially might not be effective competitively.
Yeah, you don't want to show up and think, and what fun means different. Fun means different things to different people, right? But, if people are, for the most part, going to be showing up where their idea of fun in a tournament is taking home the trophy at the end of the day, and that means winning at whatever cost, whether that's as quick as possible or just making sure my opponents don't do anything or anything in between. But yeah, you just want to know that going in, so you aren't met with a letdown or disappointment from what you expect out of it. And some tournaments may be set up differently. You talked about ones with point structures, right? Those prioritize that, and that ties back to the rules. If you see that kind of those types of rules in place, you can get an idea that that's more of what they're aiming for. You can get an idea of what they want the tournament environment to be like. But for the majority of tournaments we're talking about, and that you'll see, they're not that kind of point system where you get points for eliminating people a certain way or anything like that. You get points if you win, and you don't if you don't. So winning,
you get 1 point if you tie.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's too soon. So along with the power level, playing the appropriate power level for the tournament that you're going to be playing in, there's another word there with deck construction that we talk about a lot. We didn't add synergy on here, but consistency and synergy are probably 2 things that you want to consider. Weavers and Gretchen are 2 decks that thrive on consistency, and they overpower you, especially Gretchen in the long game. They just overwhelm and overpower you with so much consistency mana that they can just draw and just bury you under card advantage. So where decks that are not Weavers and Gretchen, that don't have this redundancy in card types and card pieces, you may want to rely more on like a synergy. So the one off the top of my head, which may be wrong or controversial, is like a Sir Conrad. Sir Conrad is a control-based deck, and it cares about creatures, the movement of creatures from one zone to the next. So your consistency is moving those creatures, having mechanisms to move those creatures through the zones and all of that stuff. But your synergy is wrapped up between what those creatures do themselves, whether or not they have an ETB effect, or if you're using like a Raise Dead or other type of what's the word I'm looking for, like griefer strategy from like Modern and stuff like that. And all of that is focused on your commander. Now, those cards individually can do stuff. That's what they do. That's why you should be selecting those cards, is because they either ETB, draw cards, or ETB, everybody sacks a creature, or something, or could be dies, triggers as well. So they're all doing things on their own, but when you add the commander into the equation, the synergy goes up. So, anything to add?
No, I think you nailed it.
Man, it's like I've done this before. Okay, win conditions. So the best way that I can describe this is with our dear friend Crackling Drake. So Crackling Drake is one of the few commanders that you can attempt to build in a myriad of different ways. You can go a combo route. You can go a control route. You can kind of go this mid-rangey, grindy pinger thing kind of route. One strategy could be better than the others out of all of those. However, there's very few commanders that you can kind of lean in various directions for. Now, that said, if I take Crackling Drake and I just intend on leveraging Crackling Drake itself for my win condition, then what'll happen, I'm putting all my eggs in one basket. Abdel Blue players have figured this out over the last year. Hence the downfall and not the lack of play of Abdel Blue. So that said, like, you want to find a way to diversify your win cons. So Crackling Drake plus pingers, which pingers have become a very good strategy this year, gives you a secondary method for engaging with your opponents and draining their life total. So even if you hypothetically never cast Drake during the game, and you're just able to storm through your, using your pingers, then you have that way of killing your opponents or using your commander. Now, you can take your commander in that example, in the Crackling Drake example, you can take your commander, you can put a lot of pingers in the deck, so you have this Voltron commander type force, and then the pingers, which are doing damage to all of your opponents, and then overlay a combo on top of that. Now you have another way, a tertiary way, to finish the game in that one deck. The deck gets really crowded when you do that. Trust me, I know. But these are things that you want to be thinking of. You want to diversify your win cons and not just have only one. And you say,
and you want to make sure you actually have one, and like focus on that. Various people have various opinions on like how actively you need to be trying to win. And I don't think there's a right answer, but you do have to have a plan for winning, and it's way better to not just be all in on one plan.
And stopping people from winning is not winning.
But it is also not losing, which I think is more important, not more important, but it's,
so
you have three other people trying to win.
Yeah.
So trying to stop three other people from winning is also very important.
And I bring this up with Bobby because we've talked about this previously. There's this nexus that you are going to have to discover. So where am I trying to win and where am I stopping people from winning? And the cross section of those two is likely the best or the most ideal deck construction for whatever commander that you're bringing. So I think that makes a lot of sense. I just pulled that out of my ass, but it sounds good.
Fooled me.
Nice. So anything left on deck construction?
No, I don't think so.
Man, we are just like Babe Ruth calling our shots. Look at that.
Like we've had this conversation so many times before.
We're really good at our jobs, Bobby. So practice and play testing. Now that you've learned the rules, you've figured out where you're going to play, if it's paper, if it's digital, you've kind of learned what the meta is or what to expect. You've built your deck, looking at power level, consistency, win conditions. Now what? Well, the answer to that is gold fishing. So I know your parents told you not to play with yourself, but dang it, it's necessary in this environment because practice, as they say, makes practice. So what you need to do is familiarize yourself with if you have a combo deck, kind of running through the lines in your combo deck, you want that stuff to be second nature. Because as we're going to talk about later, the tournament experience is fraught with stress and anxiety. So you want to make sure that you know as best as you possibly can your game plan with that particular deck, whatever that you're playing. If you're playing aggro, like a gut leader, you need to know what hands you can keep to maximize putting as much pressure on the board as soon as possible. What might be a little bit, which kind of gets us into the second point of this, is kind of knowing where to apply that pressure, but we'll get to that in a second. If you're running a combo like the aforementioned Weavers and Gretchen, Gretchen has early win attempts, in her. She absolutely does. However, because she doesn't have one of those combo pieces in the command zone, she's usually regarded as more of a late term, a late bloomer, as they say. So I feel dirty saying it. So knowing the difference between when you should win with the Weavers versus a Gretchen, which are basically a similar style deck, but just on the two opposite sides of the spectrum. Gold fishing is going to help you kind of figure out the actual mechanics of going through, searching for the pieces, playing the pieces, waiting a turn if necessary, yada, 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 which will definitely preface the next part. Anything more on gold fishing?
I think it also helps you. So, knowing the mechanics of how you win, right? And being able to winning with Gretchen requires a billion loops of things and steps. And the more you goldfish, the more you can audibly explain, hey, I'm going to do this. I'm going to draw until I have this. I'm going to do this over and over. It saves everyone time instead of you don't want to be there fumbling, in a tournament because it's the first time you've actually played the deck and your first time you've actually gone for a win. You've read or whatever, but you've never actually done it. And you can end up losing. I've seen people play Gretchen for the first time, have infinite mana, have their deck, and still just not be able to put it together because they just hadn't.
And if you sound unconfident in your loop, like, hey, I would like to demonstrate this loop, blah blah blah, and if you don't sound confident doing it, there are players out there listening to this video right now, and who will make you demonstrate that loop, and it might be to their competitive advantage to waste time having you explain that loop. So, or other myriad factors that are associated with that. I mean, like Bobby said earlier, you could have thought you were in a certain position, but not really in a position, and explained it wrong. And then once you went through the loop, discovered your error, but now your combo is already out on the table and you've already kind of screwed the pooch a little bit. So, knowing, especially where combo decks are concerned, knowing what your lines are is critical, because you're going to have to explain it, and how you explain it is definitely going to save you and a whole bunch of people a lot of time.
I think the other thing that helps with gold fishing is just getting comfortable with the setup, right? Whether, that's in person or over, webcam or on cockatrice or whatever. Getting familiar with how you need to move things and move objects, and using mock shield, right? How do I shuffle? How do I draw cards? How do I search? How do I do that all effectively and in a way that doesn't make it so it looks like I'm doing something weird or wrong or sketchy? So yeah, there's it's just a level, getting comfortable with the environment, with your deck, with the cards. All that is super important for getting ready to play in a tournament.
And that brings us to our next point. now that you've played with yourself for a number of a number of times, you want to start playing with other people. Now, where could we do that? Oh, I know. Both Sanctuary PDH and the Common Connoisseurs both have LFG channels where you can, if you're a member of those esteemed servers, Discord servers, you can join their LFG community and you can actually request games. That said, I would like to caution you that if you're a new player, or B, playing something new, you communicate those facts to those people that you're about to play a game with. Some of these environments can be chill. Some of these both environments can be chill and both environments can be cutthroat. Just a very, you just never know what you're going to get. So you want to make sure they're like, hey, I'm a new player, or hey, I'm a medium player and I'm just picking up this deck and I want to run through some stuff. You want to communicate that fact to the table. Now, that said, there are outstanding members in this community in both of those servers, which most of the people that are in both those servers are in the other servers and other servers and all that stuff. There are wonderful people in this community. If you communicate that fact, they will tailor that gameplay experience specifically for you. So if they know that it's a testing type of environment, they'll be more forgiving in mistakes. So it's like, okay, I see that you did this thing. Let's take a moment, reflect on this thing, run it back, maybe try out this other angle. You may encounter that if you have this conversation ahead of time. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the overwhelming majority of people in the online PDH community, and the PDH community as a whole, just want the format to grow. They want more people playing, so they're gonna help out. They're gonna help you if you run into issues with your setup. They'll walk you through getting it to work. I've jumped on calls to help people get setups ready for tournaments. I've done games with people who are trying out new decks. I've walked people through their combo lines for them the first time they're playing the deck, begrudgingly, right? Like, even though I've lost as a result. So, yeah, everyone, as long as you're communicating, everyone is cool. They want everyone to be on the same page because that leads to better games in the future, more people playing in tournaments, and just more PDH. And that's all everyone wants.
That's the goal, man. More PDH. Yeah. In fact, if I could snap my fingers and bring over at least 1% of those Commander players, 1%, not all of them. Have you seen those Commander players? Not all of them. Just 1%. Yeah, more PDH is the goal, and as long as, like Bobby said, as long as you're communicating and being forthright about what your expectations and experience are, everything will go fine. Okay, now we have goldfished. We've gotten in some games. We've since had a recursive relationship with the practice portion of that and the deck construction. Nobody builds the perfect 99 like straight out of the gate. You're going to make changes based on what you've seen. Specifically, you're going to, in that process of practice, you're going to know where your deck is kind of weak and where your deck is kind of strong. So the idea would be to kind of hedge against those weak parts and then build up those strong parts under the guise of consistency and synergy and all of that stuff to ensure that you are bringing this honed razor edge type, blade to a fight, and you're going to do some damage with it. So now that we've kind of worked out that sort of thing, it's tournament day. So now that we're there, now, one thing that we didn't put in here. So most tournaments have a sign up drop dead date of the Friday evening sometime, probably midnight East Coast, the night before the tournament. Along with those sign up deadlines, there's typically a deck submission deadline as well. You want to ensure that whatever list that you're playing, especially for online play specifically, is constructed in a Moxfield account or an ArcDeck account. I don't know what other ones that you particular take. I suppose you'd take a Deck Stats if it was available.
Just use Moxfield. It's so much easier.
Just use Moxfield.
Yeah.
So,
but I mean, yeah, all those work.
So you want to make sure that your deck is uploaded, and if you're not playing it digitally, if you're submitting a digital deck list, you want to make sure that your digital 100 matches exactly your paper 100, because even in online play, there's still an opportunity for a deck check. So you want to make sure that those two things match. And once you submit your deck list, you can't make changes to it after that.
Yeah. And so that's where a lot of people get hung up, because it's different in paper, right? In a paper tournament, you're usually handing the deck list and it's like the last thing you submit.
Like right then, yeah.
And you can make changes up to the last second. Once the deck list submission cuts off for like my tournaments, I'm locking those. I'm making the instance copy of them, saving them to the Sanctuary Moxfield, and those are them. So, no last minute changes after that, like just, which is good. It gets you. So it's one less thing for you to worry about the day of, which we'll talk about in a minute. Mm-hmm. But that's just submit it. You have plenty of time to get it. Don't start questioning yourself last second. Just submit it and leave it and make it all good. Don't stress about it leading up to the event. Just worry about it the day before and be done with it.
Yeah. So prepping for the event. Now, once again, we could even go backwards off of that. Most communities are broadcasting well in advance their intention to hold a tournament on a specific day. So you'll see that communicated in videos. You'll see that communicated in posts on servers. You'll see that communicated on LGS Facebook pages, or some sort of flyer hanging on the door of a physical store. You're going to know well in advance. This is back to that first thing. Rules, right? You're going to know well in advance when this tournament is happening, what time it's happening, all of that stuff. This kind of pivots into that mental preparation piece. So tournament day could be hours, could be 6 hours, could be 8 hours, could be 10 hours. It could be, well, if you do well, it could be a very, very long day. So prior to, you want to make sure that you're well rested, well hydrated. I know that sounds like a meme, like a joke, but I promise you, like, you see me sitting here with my little, Robin Hood pimp cup here. Like you are going to sit here and get dehydrated and all that. I mean, because your brain burns so many calories going through the motions of what you're trying to do, and the stress of the event, the politics, whether or not you're doing well and you're getting excited. One of our friends, whenever he has a win con in hand, he sits there and shakes. I mean, he's burning 4,000 calories right there. Sorry, Lobert. Yeah, you want to try your best to stay calm, and we're trying to put you in the best position to stay calm during this, because you're already going to burn a significant amount of calories during this process. By being anxious or otherwise agitated, it's just going to heighten that. So going back to understanding what you're seeing in the meta, going back to the gold fishing and the playtesting with friends and all of that stuff, this is going to start getting you into the rigor of being confined basically to a chair most of the day, and getting the old sweaty ass, as it were. That kind of thing. Anything on stay calm?
No, I mean, it's a whole bunch of things, but you'll definitely know the first time you don't prepare yourself for it, that, oh, this isn't messing around. I should have brought a snack or water or something. You'll realize it halfway through the day and learn for the future if you don't do it.
Have a little Star Wars lunchbox with gummy snacks. 10 out of 10 would recommend. Okay, now that we've stayed calm, let's talk about tilt. Go ahead, Bobby.
Tilt ain't sexy. It's my Moto username. It just is how it is. It's a fact of life.
I set him up and he just knocks them straight out. Look at that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a 4-player game, right? Statistically alone, obviously, whatever. Just from a pure statistical standpoint, you have a 1 in 4 shot away in this game. That means you're going to lose 3 out of 4 games. Obviously, deck choice and everything else will influence that, but the odds are against you every single game. It's not like 1v1 where, you can do better than a coin flip depending on, the deck you play or whatever. Like, you are going to lose a lot and things are not going to go your way. You'll make mistakes over the course of a long day. Nobody's perfect. Someone will do something that you disagree with, and it may mess up what your goals are or what you're trying to do. And it happens. And that's just part of it. That's part of any game. And it's easy to get worked up or hung up on it in the moment. But you got to remember at the end of the day, it's one game over the course of the day where that's happening. It's one thing that happens. And you don't know what motivate, if it's something someone else did, you don't know their motivations, you don't know what they have going on. If it's yourself, obviously, you'll want to beat up yourself on it, but it's a long day, mistakes happen. You have to track 3 other players, your own information, listen to all of them, yap all the time, yap yourself. Like, there's just so much to keep track of. So things are going to happen that don't go your way. At the end of the day, the only way you're going to, be able to stay in games and keep in a good space moving forward to try to win in the future is staying in a positive headspace, kind of brushing it off, maybe like reflecting on it in the moment, whatever that is. And sometimes you can have, civil talks about the things with your table after the fact, but
you never know what somebody else's hand is, right?
Right. And or what they're concerned about versus what you're concerned about, and what they know, what they know about someone else versus what you know about someone else. And so once you start going down the rabbit hole of like getting, in that negative headspace, tilting off, like it's just gonna lead to that many more either mistakes or bad feelings or grumpiness. Like it snowballs quick. And so you just got to pull yourself out of it. Remember, hey, this is just a game. The idea is to have fun and enjoy it, and enjoy it.
See, Bobby went through all of this to kind of like soothe and calm the beast, and here I am about to throw in something to ramp up the anxiety again. I apologize. So, statistically speaking, so yes, you will have more than one game, provided you don't DQ or otherwise get asked to leave or internet issues or what have you. So you will have more than one game, and there is a possibility that you can come back strong in game 2. However, the reason why we practice is because game 1, statistically, is super important. You want to be able to get in, secure your place with that one win. So this is tournament dynamics. We're talking about not gaming the system, but you're trying to do the competitive edge thing. So get in, put away game 1, and let game 2 kind of fall where it may. Now that said, if you don't win game 1, this is where you're staying calm, keeping a positive mindset, learn from your mistakes, which is point number 3 of this section here. What did I do wrong? And it might not even be something that you particularly did wrong. It may be the impact of some other player that caused whatever to happen. So just take that, learn from it, and apply that in game 2, which is the second most statistical important round to win. Obviously, the most important is the last one. So, yeah, anything on mental prep, all that stuff? Now, I do have some fun anecdotes. So just like competitive sports, some people get really superstitious about this stuff. So, I'm not saying they don't wash their socks, but, it's that kind of level stuff where it's like, oh my God, I have to put my deck in another room so that way it doesn't talk to me and think about it, that sort of thing. Like, no. If you are superstitious, I'm sorry that it's not meant to offend, but I am shuffling my deck. I am running out hands and all that stuff all the way up till like maybe 10 or 15 minutes before start time. A lot of that is just a nervous like shuffling and stuff like that. But yeah, like if you, I guess what I'm getting to and trying to synthesize the point on is find a ritual, get into this process, and that will help to alleviate some of the anxiety and keep you more level as you're going through, the rigor of tournament play.
Be comfortable. That's all that matters. It'll make everything else easier.
All right. So the last category, tournament etiquette. Now, of course, related to this is the rules and regulations, and also the mental preparation is interspersed into this as well. How do you feel about spite plays and other types of unsportsmanlike conduct?
I hate when they come up and having to answer questions about them. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, everyone's coming to play with the idea of winning. And so, there may be times where someone does something that really screws you over and you want to get back at them. But at the end of the day, that probably doesn't improve your chances of winning. It just, is a rude thing to them. Generally speaking, spite plays are frowned upon. There's no hard and fast rules about them because there's way too much that goes into, analyzing whether or not, that's a spite play or not. And it doesn't do judges or tournament organizers any good to try to govern that behavior, because then everything gets questioned all the time. Motos get questioned and games would never get finished. But generally speaking, play to win, play in a way that maximizes your chance of winning, and be respectful to other people, and at least try to see where they're coming from when they make decisions, even though if you disagree. But odds are good they have some reasoning behind it, whether, varying levels of soundness. But
so if spite plays are the novice level entry into unsportsmanlike, type of conduct, right? So the next level stuff would be more like king making and collusion, which are indeed against the rules. Like, what's the best advice? Well, king making necessarily wouldn't be, but collusion definitely is. So what would be, when confronted with the potential for something like this, what would be, as a tournament organizer, what would be your best advice to approach that?
Well, king making kind of falls into the category of spite plays too, where you're kind of like, again, it's really hard to piece together whether or not something is. I've seen plenty of things called king making that I don't think are king making, right? And it's all my perspective. But like collusion, for example, the biggest thing is, don't before you say something that you even think could be construed as, a problem, like colluding, ask a judge, hey, is this something that's okay, or is this against the rules? As long as it's better to ask before you do a thing than after. You don't want to ask for forgiveness. You want to get permission, which is, opposite the famous sayings or whatever. But yeah, figure out, and this kind of goes back to knowing the rules, knowing everything. But generally speaking, just focus on playing to win. Don't, especially in your first tournament, don't try to get cute with it. Don't try to get fancy with it. Just focus on you. Focus on playing to win. There are people who may say, hey, we could all draw into top 4 here if we just draw. And if you don't know that and you don't feel comfortable doing that, don't do it. You don't have to say yes. If you're fortunate enough to make the top 4, or whatever the top cut is, and assuming the tournament organizer is okay with it, and someone proposes the idea of, hey, we split the prize money but play to be, for the bragging rights of being the champion, and you want to do that, generally speaking, that's going to be fine most of the time, but you want to just know if that's okay or not, and know if it's okay to that question. So just ask a judge.
It might be against the rules. It might not be. Yeah. Ask. Yeah. Right on. So we can end this portion on a prime example of what is not a spite play, just for an example. My favorite example is this. If you have a number of blockers and someone has a number of attackers and they are attacking you, and whatever extra damage is going to hit you is going to kill you, it is safe to assume that they were going to accept the loss of their creature should, those blocked creatures die. It is safe to assume that they knew the risks of attacking and the potential of losing their creatures. So even though you may die by combat damage, it is not a spite play to take out as many of their resources as possible as you exit the game, because they knew the risk. So that's my favorite example of something that's not a spite play that I like to provide players, and I think that's pretty apropos.
Yeah, that's the cost of doing business. And when you're doing that, you're also still maximizing your chance to win, because there could be an opponent that wants you in the game still and doesn't want that player killing you, whether it gives them, there's a multitude of things, right? They could get the initiative and that would give them some insane value if you die to that person, or, you have someone's commander under like a lignify and you dying unlocks that in a way that's really bad for the rest of the table, right? There's all these sorts of things. So never just like assume it, make them have it, make them use their resources to kill you. And if they do, they do, but you put up your fight. So
right on. Okay, so part 2 of tournament etiquette is time management. This is a direct callback to deck construction, to practice and play testing, and a little bit of the rules. Most tournaments through regular rounds are timed. Those times may vary slightly, although Bobby and I have put in some tremendous work in trying to standardize those in places where we can, but most places will be timed. If your deck construction doesn't allow for you to win a game for whatever reason in the allotted amount of time, you're probably going to go to a draw, and draws, while not losses, are not wins. So
not great.
So now that said, interesting part about this, and this is totally an aside, a bonus for those, I was going to say stats nerds, even though there's no stats associated with that. I've actually noticed that people in the preceding tournaments, this last quarter, people with one win and people with one win and a draw, that's setting up a very interesting dynamic as far as the field is concerned as we get into those later rounds. So, draws are not wins, and you don't want to have draws because they don't guarantee anything in later turns. However, you still want to be mindful of that clock because draws are not your friend. I know that sounds like I just did this Mobius strip thing.
They can be your friend depending on what happens in a game. Sometimes that's what you're out anymore. Like you're out of winning, but you can try to get a draw, right? But yeah, to your point, like you got to build with the time constraints in mind. And that plays into like being comfortable. You don't want to take forever to resolve a transmute every single time.
Like, talk about slow play. Yeah.
You should know what you're doing. You should make actions relatively quickly, and don't sit and, when we talk about, and we're going to talk about communication and everything here in a minute too, but it's real easy for things to get bogged down and talk and just taking forever to resolve something, whether that's mechanically fumbling with cards, whatever. And so that it just reemphasizes all of our previous points about just, getting comfortable with headspace, deck construction, gameplay, the platforms, knowing how to talk through things, because all of that, like every single one of those just
it's all time
precious seconds off of all your actions. And the more you can do that, the more time you have to win the game and find a way to win the game.
There's a reason why time of possession in a football game is a notable statistic, because the person who usually takes the most time usually has the most resources associated with that. So, okay. So we covered slow play. Good job. Don't do it. That could result in a game infraction as well. So be wary of that. If your opponents tell you that you should probably pick up the pace, try to recognize whether or not they're being a bad actor while doing it, because some people have done that previously. But also, just be respectful, which brings us into this last and final point, communication. So if you are fumbling through something, it's actually okay to say hey, I need a sec. Now, recognize that's a balance kind of thing, because you're only going to get the amount of time that you've actually communicated in good faith that your pod will give you. So I know we're talking a lot about time and stuff like that, but talking with the people in your pod relative to your gameplay actions and your intentions, now we can get into things like lying and things of that nature, is critical. So I don't think it's against the rules to lie.
Well, it's against the rules to lie to the judge about something. It's against the rules to, lie about, things, misrepresent board states and stuff like that.
Known items versus unknown items.
Right. Yeah. Like to say I don't have removal in your hand when you're looking at a Doomblade, that's lying, but there's nothing against the rules. No one knows you have a Doomblade in your hand and you say I don't have a Doomblade, and then you end up Doomblading something. You're going to lose some social equity there, but that's all, a personal preference thing. I'm not going to, I play one way. I prefer to not lie. I'll also be very deliberate in how I answer questions. Mm-hmm. And so you'll want to pick up on that from people.
Almost like a lawyer, huh?
Yeah, weird. But you'll want to be aware of that, right? Because everyone is trying to win. So everyone has some incentive to keep things close to their vest and not, share everything. And so never just assume you can take it all at face value, I guess is my general thought. There's a lot to glean from the little tricky ways people answer things.
It's never what people say. It's always what they don't say.
Yeah.
And much like Bobby, like the way that I enforce my no lying policy is I'll tell you an objective truth that is actual, factual, and provable. It might not be exactly what you asked me, but, I will tell you that this person is going to kill you with their board state, maybe to take the focus off of me. Now, you have the choice whether or not you focus me down, because that's the thing. You focus me down, we're both going out together, because this person is legitimately going to do the thing that I just warned you about. But it's that delicate balance of like figuring out how to navigate those politics of that situation, dealing with outright liars and people who overly dramatically misrepresent their status and station. It's really difficult to really negotiate with those people. One option is to not. So you always have the option not to politic with someone. So just remember that, kids. So there's going to be, most games, there's going to be communication flying everywhere. Usually it's this perceived status, or not necessarily a perceived status, but the perception of the status that they want to be put out there about their board states. So everybody's going to be talking, and typically, like for me, if I have one or less pieces of removal and I get the spider sense tingly feeling that something is going to happen within the next turn or so, I will communicate that, hey, somebody else will likely need to help with this, because the way that combo turns work is the person comboing has at least one piece of interaction, so you need that second piece to be able to get around the first. Often they also have a second piece, but I digress. That's how you play the game, right? That's how you build the decks. So, relative to communication and politicking, I think inwardly to the pod, that's one thing. Outwardly, I can't overemphasize this enough. Call a judge. If you have questions, concerns, thoughts, don't hesitate. Call a judge. More often than not, see, the problem most people don't, the reason why most people don't is they feel this social guilt about delaying the game. The judge will almost always give you some form of extension based on that. The judge will make up the time for you. So you are not responsible for losing time off the clock, because that typically happens depending on how how fast they are able, if they're able to get to you and solve it really quickly, maybe not, but that likely doesn't happen, all that often. Yeah, quite often there'll be a time extension associated with that judge call for clarity. Do not sweat it. Call the damn judge. Just do it.
And one other point on the politicking, it'll happen. You'll have some people who are way more talkative than others. You'll fall somewhere on that spectrum of, I'm not interested in it versus I'm going to yap the whole time, right? The important thing is just realize when people are disengaging and leave it, right? Like, don't force someone into it. Don't beat a dead horse. If someone is clearly expressed they're not willing to engage with your politicking or whatever you're trying to, whatever snake oil you're trying to sell to them,
just leave it be.
Leave it. Move on, because otherwise you're going to get a judge involved. It could start coming across as aggressive or hostile. Yeah, and you don't want to get into that. Just have some awareness about the table. Read the table. Read people's reactions and adjust accordingly.
Sweet. All right. I believe that's us. Any closing thoughts before we wrap this up?
No, I mean, for anyone who's thinking about playing a tournament for the first time, just give it a try. A lot of this may sound intimidating. It may sound like a lot, but if it does, just reach out. Clay, myself, any other person in any of these discords, in the PDH community as a whole, people want to help out and make you feel welcome and, get you playing PDH and get you join tournaments. So reach out if you have questions, and there are plenty of people who are willing to help out.
All right, so in the description of this video, my friends, I'm going to put the Discord links for both the Common Connoisseurs and Sanctuary PDH. I'm going to put in the links to their YouTube channels you can watch gameplay coverage with the most exciting commentary you've ever heard in your freaking life over on Bobby's channel. You'll also get some good deck techs and how-tos over on Ryan's Common Connoisseurs. Of course, as always, use cpdh.guide for your cPDH metagaming needs, all that stuff. I'll include all of that down below so you have resources. Go play those games. Find your deck. Don't forget to prepare yourself mentally. And have snacks. So it's going to be a day. I promise you. It'll be rewarding. It'll be stressful. It'll be a great time. All right. Say goodbye, Bobby.
Bye, Bobby.
Perfect.